The changes to the UK's AI have been divisive, to say the least, with some players being totally opposed to them, while many wonder what all the fuss is about. But in all of this, I have been wondering, are these changes good for Hoi4 on the whole? And should they be reverted? But before we go any further, I want to nip something in the bud immediately. The historical argument. Yes, invading the UK is inherently unrealistic, but Hoi4 is a video game, and being unrealistic has been a part of its MO since day one. So, let's leave this on the table for today, please. Alright, from the top. I think pretty much every player knows that invading the UK was pretty easy. Pretty much every guide for doing it pre-DLC can be summarised as wait for a blip of supremacy, invade Newcastle and Hull, GG. And it's clear that Paradox wanted a change. With GGR, the UK is now very vigilant. Getting the blip is extremely rare. They have troops galore and enough air to push most naval invasions back into the sea. Of course, they are not invincible. With enough air of your own, good division templates, and luck, are still enough to send them packing to the peace deal screen. So, what is the problem? It looks like Paradox did a pretty good job of making it difficult, but still possible. Well, for me, this seems to be the problem, as very few countries are in a position to contest them. Germany, sure. The Soviets, obviously. Italy, why not? Notice something? These are all major nations, all of which do have the production capability to surpass the UK if played properly. Now, don't get me wrong, play badly and you'll still lose. However, it feels like most of the changes were made with Germany in mind, as most of these problems affect Germany the most. A small navy, an air force with room to grow, and an army that needs so much work. I feel like Paradox tested these changes on them the most, to see if it was still possible for Germany to defeat the Allies, which is understandable considering the circumstances, but it feels like they neglected something. So, what happens when you're a minor nation, like Spain, Belgium, Hungary? I'm still unsure of how Paradox intends for minor nations to take on the Allies, and this does concern me. For many of these nations, they can only really afford a good amount of some things, but not everything. Maybe you'll have to prioritise guns and artillery instead of dockyards to challenge the Royal Navy, or less naval bombers to afford support equipment, and so on. This is not a bad thing in of itself. Some countries have less potential than others, obviously, but for many of these nations, it's too high of a mountain to climb before the US joins the Allies and practically makes it a game over. There is always that time limit of Japan declaring on the Allies. Many players do not have the time, willpower, or desire to conquer the US and UK, meaning there is genuinely only so much a player can do before it's too late. To interject, you could solve some of these with a peace out with the US event, but I don't like that. It's where I draw the line, personally. Which brings us back to the majors. As for them, this is trivial. There is no problem. But for everyone else, it's a major roadblock. The way Hoi4 is designed means countries snowball easily, especially majors, who are in the best position to do so. So one dockyard becomes 10, and catching them is no easy feat. Just think of how many achievements have been made so much harder because of this. I can think of We Will Rock You, Miklos Horthy, and hardly anything Severus just off the top of my head. But there's tons more affected by this change. Pretty much anything that goes against the Allies has been affected. And that's the thing. I've seen so many games get screwed because of this. And it gets me thinking, has this change done more harm than good? Has it made Hoi4 less fun? It's an important metric. Hoi4 being fun should be top priority. A bad game can still be fun, but an unrewarding one is a much harder sell. Honestly, I don't know. I don't think the devs were wrong to do the changes that they did, as I thought it was inevitable that something would come at some point. But I can't get over the feeling that they might have gone a little too far. Encouraging new strats is an admirable goal, but for many minor nations, it's gotten to the point where the best option for some of them is to cheese it, with things like deleting the UK stuff, port strats, reinforced memes, and so on. As tempting as it might be to go ha 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 ha, look at those scrubs, I don't think that's fair. Not everyone knows how, or wants to do hyper-complex micro-naval invasions where you spend hours designing every little thing. Sometimes you just want to invade the UK and call it a day. I was fine with how it was before. It was not the easiest thing to do. It did take some effort. But like all things in Hoi4, it fell apart if you knew how the game worked, which I thought was a good sign of a player's progression. The UK was probably the second easiest major to take down, but that was okay. Not everything has to be sweaty micro affairs, you know? By the way, yes, minor nations can still take down the UK. It's not impossible. Very few things in Hoi4 truly are, but it's that barrier of entry that's the problem. The difficulty curve has been made way too sharp. And let's be honest here, Hoi4 does a really bad job of explaining how you're meant to play it. Hoi4's method of teaching is old school. It throws you in at the deep end and expects you to swim. Some of us can, but just as many of us sink. So for many players, they're left lacking, with few ways to get the knowledge they need. Of course, this is where people like me come in with our guides. But in a perfect world, Hoi4 would have a functional tutorial that would allow players to learn in-game too. Since Hoi4's real tutorial is awful and we all know it. And this brings us on to the most important thing. What should the devs do about it? Well, I think there is a few things they could do. Number 1, do a full reversion and go back to how it was. I think this would be okay. However, I don't think this is going to happen. The player base has already begun to adapt, and I don't think Paradox wants to punish those players. In any case, them reverting is extremely rare. The only time I can think of them doing it was the recent Scandinavian formable changes. Although a workaround to all of this could be a community vote. Much less backlash if the community has approved of it. 2, make the UK's AI less competent. This one I think is the most likely. If the naval supremacy blip was easier to find and the UK had slightly less stuff in the Isles, we could find that middle ground where everyone is happy. It's still a challenge, but it's been made viable for most minor nations. Number 3, change how naval invasions work. As the naval supremacy blip has always been a weird thing. Instead of waiting for an honestly arbitrary 50% supremacy, you can just launch a naval invasion at any time, and you replace supremacy with a chance of interception. The higher the chance, the higher likelihood of being attacked during the crossing. Supremacy will still matter, but you can make that desperate invasion at any time. Maybe it can work. Maybe it won't, but that's something for you to find out. And good luck with the supply. Number 4, do nothing. Things are still being discovered. Maybe there is a perfect strat just around the corner. But as we know, Hoi4 works in mysterious ways. Like most things, however, there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. No matter what Paradox chooses, not everyone will be satisfied. But I know there is an ideal solution out there. We just need to find it. Let me know what you think. There are infinite possibilities here. So until next time everybody, I thank you for watching, do hope you've enjoyed it, and until we meet again, from me, Bubbles Zest. Goodbye.